years old, pregnant with twins at a time that should have been a most joyous occasion for her. She was 9 months pregnant at the time. She turned up missing. After she had left her home to head to her sister's house because she was so near to her confinement, and the distance was just too great, the risks too much should she go into labor at her home, because there was no access. This young pregnant girl would later be discovered stuffed under a bridge with her two newborns, one having actually been birthed in the struggle for her life and stuffed back up its mother's cavity. The crime was brutal. The grief, unmeasurable. The identities of the perpetrators, inconceivable. One would like to think that a monster to the victim. 9 months pregnant, violently raped. By two men who were close to her. Fast forward to 2017, and we're still marching. Still marching because our women continue to be violated in the worst way. Sadia Byron lost her life. In a manner no woman should ever have to face. Why, you say? Because we have had way too many examples of women being violated, being raped, being tossed aside like so much garbage. The sons of this soil raping incessantly and with impunity the daughters of this land. We would remember names like Mary Ratcliffe, Cynthia Paul, Karen Paul, Donna John, Valerie Lord, Mary Henry, Tricia Dennis, Giselle Georges, Pascalina Bettine, Ife Bettine, Johan Bettine, Valinda Joseph, Josephine Emmanuel, Sherry-Ann Myers, Feliciana Charles and Macrina Charles, Berthalie Mangal, Alicia Hunt, Caroline Joanne Cox, Christelle Alicia Fannis, Takesha Fannis, Cherise Benoit, Sadia Byron. The list goes on and on and on. And the more things change, the more they remain the same. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Women in this country have been oppressed by the scourge of domestic violence way too long. In spite of legislation and training courses designed for all citizens, frontline workers, husbands, wives, children, police officers, social workers, the scourge continues to flourish. How many of you would remember an incident where a common law husband so brutally bit his wife right in the city center, in full view of a multitude of people? It was even caught on tape by a television crew. That beating was so brutal, it resulted in the woman becoming unconscious and being taken away by ambulance. This happened not more than 10 years ago, March 17th, 10 days after the observance of International Women's Day. Do you remember that incident? How about the Dennery woman who was stabbed to death by her common law husband? Do you Dennery people remember her screams? You ought to. It ought to be haunting you, giving you nightmares, because you heard and you did nothing. Or how about her sister from Soufrière, whose home was set ablaze by her boyfriend, her common law husband, because she dared to defy him and leave him? She died along with her 2 children. Just imagine accidentally burning your fingertip on a candle. How that smarts, and how for days your fingertip is numb, and how uncomfortable that is. And just multiply that feeling by 2, 4, 6, 8, or even 10 million times the pain. That's what I imagine when I think of a person being set ablaze, burning to death. How your skin feels, being cooked from the inside out because of this inferno. You can't escape it. You try to protect your children, but you can't, because you're on fire, you're ablaze. And so, because you didn't have the nerve to leave a relationship characterized by incessant beatings, your children suffer the ultimate fate. Or how many of you remember the ancillary incident? I'm deliberately not naming names because I named them before. And I wonder how many of you can match the names that I called earlier to the incidents I'm mentioning now. In ancillary, a 19-year-old young woman on the cusp of life was hacked to death by her boyfriend. Again, neighbors heard the screams and did nothing. A police station just a few yards away Her mother died with her. The police station was just a few yards away. And yet, by the time the police arrived, both women were dead. The neighbors heard and did nothing. Well, of course, I'm certain we all know of Mary Ratcliffe and her demise, literally losing her head over her daughter. And just when you thought it could not be any more heinous, we recall two little children being handed a death sentence, though they were still alive, because they were raped by their stepfather, who was HIV positive. We hear all these stories on the international news, but we conveniently forget that they happen right here in this land which gave us birth. A 26-year-old woman from the community of Bexon comes home to find her father having sex with her 9-year-old daughter, raping her. And that's the language we use. Huh? We don't say rape because it's too harsh. Why you have to talk like that? You know? Why you have to say it on national television? Why don't you say have sex with instead? It's not having sex with if you cannot consent, if you did not consent, if you had no intention of consenting. And last I checked, in our statutes, a 9-year-old cannot consent to having sex. But here is this 26-year-old woman coming home to finding her father, this child's grandfather, violating her in the worst way. But that's not all. You see, the 26-year-old herself is a victim of rape by her father. Resulting from that rape was the 9-year-old. So here is this animal raping his own daughter / granddaughter. And his own daughter, whom he raped, who is the mother of his daughter / granddaughter, catching him in the act. Just imagine the effect on your psyche and your mind at that point. But that's not all. This 26-year-old woman had 4 sisters, 3 of whom also bore their father children. So there you have one man having 5 daughters, 4 of whom bore him children. And the cycle continues, because he wasn't satisfied with having his own daughters in the most carnal way, but his grandchildren as well. Where are the family members, the other family members, you ask? Busy protecting this monster. Guess who's shunned for speaking out against the father / grandfather? Yes, you guessed it right. The 26-year-old mother. She bore her own sister. She's raising her own sister. She gave birth to her own sister, literally. And she's the one who's a bad person for speaking out against the monster that we incubate in our homes, in our communities. Downright shameful. And that is putting it precariously mildly. And we all know about Valinda Joseph, the poster child for rape. Raped, forced to ingest a noxious substance, being murdered in the process on the very same day that she was to give evidence against a pending rape case. Not one, but at least two. And what about the 17-year-old girl who refused the sexual advances of her stepfather and as a result was severely maimed, not being able to use either of her hands? He chopped that poor girl so badly all over her body. She lost the use of her hands. And what about the 13-year-old schoolgirl who suffered very regular and severe beatings from her father and her stepmother? And this is the one case, too infrequent if you ask me, where the neighbors and the community, having made numerous calls to the police, having reported several times, decided that enough was enough, and they marched down to police headquarters, demonstrating and calling much public attention to what was happening in their community. Kudos to them. We need more communities like that. And it's only after public embarrassment that anything was done. We keep talking about the shameful practice of gender-based violence, but we keep doing nothing about it. We keep electing men and women every 5 years who shamefully look us in the face and tell us that they will do something about it. Some of them build their entire careers sourcing funding from all kinds of donor agencies, selling a bill of goods which they never deliver on. And we keep electing them year after year after year after year. They keep shafting us year after year after year, despite being shafted already by the very monsters that we incubate in our homes and in our communities. We do that because we protect them. We shun anybody who will speak ill of them, because what? They hand us a few dollars, a few pesos. Remember Judas Iscariot? At least Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Some of us don't even go for that much. Some of us don't even ask for that much. And what do we do? Because of this Wajma system, we breed these cyclops-like monsters, these inhumane excuses for human beings. It's a shame, really. We are so oppressed that we aren't even aware of it. Remember, not so long ago, a bystander reported seeing a little girl, about 5 years old, bobbing up and down like some professional dancer, that she didn't even need music to get the rhythm. Out in the open. After having been groomed by this family friend. Bobbing, he says. He said he saw the child bobbing, but he was hearing no music. Upon investigation, he found this man who claimed to be a family friend, who was left to care for that little child, raping her. Except they will not say raping, having sex with her. That's what they will say. That's what was said. Having sex with her. He wasn't having sex with her, he was raping her. He was raping her. In 2017, we're still burying our sisters, our daughters, our nieces, our cousins, our mothers, our friends. From all accounts, tonight's candlelight vigil in honor of Sadia Byron was a success. Huge numbers of women, men, and children turned out. In what most would say a solidarity effort for Sadia. People who didn't even look at her as amounting to anything much, who probably didn't even know her in life, all came out in solidarity for the family, her children. But you know what? The Sadias of this world, the Valindas of this world, the Macrinas of this world, the Mary Ratcliffes of this world, they all needed these people while they were alive. Maybe, just maybe, if even 1/8 of the people who turned out for Sadia tonight comforted her while she was alive and being continually raped, maybe she'd still be alive today. Maybe, just maybe, if 1/16 of the people who turned up for Valinda's march supported her, then she was going through her own trials. Maybe, just maybe, she'd be a vibrant, sort of well-adjusted young lady today. But sadly, we're due for a break. Stay tuned. The latest development in the Sadia Byron saga allegedly is that all of, how do the police put it, persons of interest assisting police with their investigations have been released pending overseas examinations. Are you surprised? I'm not. This is as predictable as breathing. As predictable as the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. As a matter of fact, I could have told you even before Sadia was murdered, before her body was found, that any forensics evidence found at the crime scene would have been sent away for investigations by an outside source. And in the meantime, any person of interest would have been released on their own recognizance, of course, because after all, they cannot be charged with anything because there's no evidence. Anybody who would have heard anything would not have spoken. Anybody who would have seen anything would never tell. We have what our politicians like to repeat is one of the most arguably top-notch forensics lab in the region. Top-notch, huh? But it remains largely inoperable, inoperative. 3 years ago, the lab was closed and any DNA or any forensics evidence found at any crime scene, whether it was a rape, whether it was a murder, oh, and by the way, we're now at 54 murders for the year, huh? And remember earlier this year I said we were trending towards 60? Getting closer and closer, closer and closer. And any evidence that is found at any one of those horrific crime scenes has to be referred to an outside lab. Now here's what we've been told. That a large number of samples in a number of cases have been batched, packaged, and sent off for testing. You see nothing wrong with that? I'll repeat myself. A large number of samples in a large number of cases have been batched, packaged, and sent off for testing. Batched. Which means to say that there is a collection of evidence in a number of cases that are not dealt with in a timely fashion. So we wait until we have a batch and we ship them off, because that is the emphasis, the importance, the priority that we place on life. So even in death, your life means nothing, because unless and until there is a batch, your evidence, the evidence that your loved ones and mine were able to preserve even in death, nothing will be done about it unless and until there is a batch. So while you think an investigation is taking place, every time the police tells you, we will call you as we get more information, they will never get any more information because the evidence is still in St. Lucia, never having left for testing. And so it calls into question the chain of command. Are we preserving this evidence in such a manner that we were preserving the integrity? Do we even know how to properly collect evidence in the field? Do we really have crime scene investigators? Or are they really glorified crime scene protectors? And even then, that's questionable. So, how long does the entire referral process take? We know it takes a while before it actually leaves St. Lucia. So let's say at the rate we're going this year, it takes a month before we get a batch, or 3 months before we get a batch to send. That's 3 months of no activity. How long after we've sent it can we expect some results from the external lab? We know that police always tells us that the more information that they get from eyewitnesses early in the game, the better the detection rate. And we all have cables now, despite the fact that we continue to lambaste flow. We still have somewhat good service, enough to follow investigative discovery, enough to follow programs like First 48 Hours. And one thing all of these shows have in common is that they highlight real life cases, one, yes, but two, most importantly, is that the first 48 hours in any crime investigation is the most critical. And the longer we wait, or the longer it takes after that initial 48 hours, the colder the case gets. So in Valinda Joseph's case, how cold is that case? Trisha Dennis, how cold is that case? How cold will Sadia Byron's case get before we forget she ever existed? You know, when Valinda Joseph was murdered, the police said that the case was a treasure trove of forensics evidence. I seem to recall similar words being uttered around Sadia's case. 15 years later, Valinda's murder case still cannot be solved. How long will it take us before Sadia gets justice? A treasure trove of forensics evidence. 15 years later, we're still waiting for justice. So we boast of having a state-of-the-art forensics lab, largely dormant forensics lab, because guess what? We continue to build elephants. We continue to accept gifts that we cannot maintain. So we have a lab, state of the art. We cannot manage it. We cannot maintain it. So it's largely closed. We don't even know to what extent the lab is being used, because we have been told, not just by this administration, but the last one as well, that the lab would be open partially. I don't know what that means. Do you? Can somebody tell us what it means to be open partially a forensics lab? And how much work is being driven through the partially open part of that lab? It is so sad. It is so sad. Because almost like a clairvoyant, you don't need to be a clairvoyant actually. I can foresee that Sadia's case is going nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. I mean, here is a young mother who is on the eve of graduating. She has her entire future spanning before her, finally taking charge of her life and her destiny, doing something that would better herself, to create and provide a better life for her children. And she snuffed out just like that. And we're marching, bearing holes in our shoes, crying copious amounts of tears over the travesty of another lost daughter. Not just one daughter, but when you factor in her mother, who is a woman, her two daughters, and her numerous nieces and cousins, an entire community of women who suffer because of her fate, who are fearful because the monster or monsters who did this to her are somewhere at large and we don't know who they are. All because our government, not talking about administration, our government, this one and previous ones, do not see it fit to put human life on a pedestal. We always say life is priceless, it's precious. But why do we quantify it so? Why do we put a dollar amount on it? Why do we say we can't afford this and we can't afford that when we can afford other things? We can find the wherewithal to be drinking champagne and to be hosting celebrities and the who's whom of society. But meanwhile, the masses who put you in the position in the first place cannot get justice. And then we want to vilify women like Mary Frances because she stands up for human rights. And we say, okay, she's always talking about the criminals. But if we don't do what is right, she will always stand up, not for the criminals, but for the rights of human beings. Because when you violate these rights, the rights of the criminals, and we have no choice but to let them loose because of shoddy police work, guess what? You are guaranteed that more women, more girls, more little boys are going to be violated in this land. You know, tonight I heard, I will leave this for later. I will leave this for later. Because I don't want to say the words, I want you to hear the words from the pronouncer's mouth. Mary Ratcliffe lost her head. Sadia Byron shit herself from fear of what she ought to have known was a certainty while she was being brutalized. Where are our politicians? The ones charged with ameliorating this situation? Where are all the gender rights people who collect money hand over fist in the name of preserving the lives of the abused? You know, when we get one or two of them to be brave enough to speak out instead of listening to the message. We attack the character. And yes, there are ways to say things that could be very impactful. But I think it's incumbent upon you and me and all of us, men in particular, to listen to the message, to heed the message, to act on the message. We're due for another break. When we come back, the lines will be open so that you can share your thoughts and your views on this topic. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Thank you for staying tuned. Tonight, on the evening news, I was appalled to hear, nothing against the woman, to hear Alison Jean, PS in the Ministry of Education, make a statement that I've been waiting to hear from a high-ranking official in the Ministry of Education. But now that I've heard it, I'm wondering, what's the disconnect here? What is the disconnect here? I'm not going to tell you what she said. I want you to listen for yourself.
The permanent secretary at the time of her comments was addressing the opening of a UNESCO-sponsored 3-day regional orientation and a training workshop on education sector responses to school-related gender-based violence in the Caribbean region. Ms. Jean says the ministry under her watch will protect no one who violates school children.
Any report which I receive that relates to inappropriate behavior towards our school students will be swiftly reported to the relevant authorities for appropriate action. There will be zero tolerance to inappropriate behavior of our students.
Tolerance.
Our schools must be a
zero tolerance. Zero tolerance for the abuse of our school children. Forget the ones who are not in school, but at least the ones in school. We will protect them at every cost. And yet, we continue to hear of principals and teachers violating not just girl children, but boy children as well. Collecting taxpayers' money. That's my money and your money. While investigations which go nowhere are conducted. You know, in the real world, just the mere allegation, the seriousness of these allegations is grounds enough for suspension without pay and even expulsion of these teachers. But in St. Lucia, our Paisia, we have principals and teachers who have been accused not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but as many, allegedly, as 12 times. 12 times. And they continue to suck me and you dry through the tax coffers. We continue to sound the clarion call to the Ministry of Education to come out and tell us what is the status of these cases. Not a word, not a word, not a word. Nothing. Aye, niet, nada. Bupkas. I don't know how else to say it. We continue to hear nothing. But tonight, the PS in the Ministry of Education will say, not under her watch. I wonder how long she's been there for. What do you think? 6 seconds? It's appalling. We all know the cases. We all know the reports that have been made. And yet still we hear nothing from the people that we pay. It's like me having a business. I hire a manager to run the business. I hire all sorts of employees with all sorts of skills to manage different aspects of the business. And when I ask them for a report on the business, everybody take mumu tablets. Everybody ignoring me, and everybody expects me to pay them a salary at the end of the month. You know, in the real world, that ain't happening, right? That ain't happening. But this is what we, St. Lucians, continue to accept from our public service. The lines are now open. You can reach me at 4519788, or you can send me your WhatsApp messages at 284-6536, or send me your emails at laurajapier@gmail.com. I need to hear from you. The world needs to hear your voices on these issues. We can't afford to continuously have our daughters, our mothers, our children, our cousins, our family members, our friends being raped, not just in life, but for those who physically have died. They continue to be raped in perpetuity because there is no justice, no closure for the family. Our children continue to be murdered even while they're alive because we, those who have been charged with the responsibility of caring for them, continue to rape them. We have a call online? We have a call? Good evening, you're on the air. Hello? We lost the call? We lost the call. So the number to call is 4519788, or you can send me your WhatsApp messages at 284-6536, or your emails at laurajapier@gmail.com. Come on now, people. Why do we continue to let ourselves be raped like that? If someone were to break into our homes or to accost us in the streets, and they were attempted to rape us, we wouldn't just spread and tell them have at it, would we? But this is what we do when we accept this inertia from our government leaders. We have a call online. Thank you for calling. What's on your mind?
Miss Sarah?
Yes?
I think solution for raping is to do it just like Suriname. Bring them in the public on the square and 2 strokes on their ass every day. That's the solution to stop raping in this place.
You think? What about those men who rape, but they're protected by the women folk? And I'm talking about the ones in power, the ones in positions, the lawyers, the doctors, the government officials, the teachers.
All these people are decomplice. A lot of them need to go to jail.
But who's going to put them in jail? Who's going to be the first person to point the accusatory finger?
And I think the law in St. Lucia is a little bit too slack. They're a bunch of slackers and hypocrites. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for calling and thank you for sharing. Somebody says via WhatsApp, I feel the government should use these criminals as organ donors. Too many people have kidney problems and these prisoners are being fed. Take a kidney from all the healthy ones. There's a solution. There is a suggestion. Again, the number to call is 4519788. The number to WhatsApp is 284-6536. We have another call online.
Yes, hello, good night.
Good night. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I think you should hang them.
So bring back the hangman.
Yeah, just for the rapists and them alone.
Just for the rapist.
Yeah.
What about
the child molesters?
The child molesters. Okay. Who's going to point the accusatory finger at the molesters and the rapists?
Well, that's true. Right?
That's why we have so many of them walking free. And not just the ones, the smelly ones, you know, the ones in the lower echelons. We have those in ministerial positions.
Yeah,
we have
a lot of them.
Absolutely. But the question...
Even in the police station have them too.
But the question remains...
Who will point
who
at
will
them?
point the finger and stand by their word,
Yes.
who won't take jugement. Because I know that there are dirty cops. I know that there are cops who have raped.
Yeah.
Allegedly, I shouldn't say who have,
Allegedly, yeah.
because they have not been brought to court and they have not
Yeah.
had the day in court.
But trust me, they should do something about them, seriously.
But there are those who, by their very actions, tell you that they are because of the
Yeah.
jugement. When you offer jugement to make it go away, what exactly are you saying?
Well, what they should do, as long as it reaches the court, they shouldn't have no judgment. The court should do something about that.
But
too.
even before it gets to the courts, there's the jugement. You know, I don't want it to go to court, so I'm going to pay you $2,000. And can you believe it? $2,000, and you're going to make it go away? So what am I, a high-class call girl? I'm a prostitute? You raped me, and then you're going to tell me to take $2,000? That is why we don't call it rape, you know. That is why we say they had sex with her. He had sex with her, you know. Even though she said no, he continued to have sex with her. It's not sex at that point. It's rape. And $2,000 is not going to cleanse me again. It's not going to make me whole. It's not going to undo what you have done. Thank you so much for calling and for sharing, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. What is your take? We have another call online. Thank you for calling. We lost that call. Okay. So the number to WhatsApp is 284-6536. You don't send it to me, but you use it to call. Thank you for calling. What's on your mind? Hello? Did we lose that call? Okay, we keep losing our calls. Okay, so the number to call is 4519788 and send me your WhatsApp message at 284-6536 or your email messages at laurajapierre@gmail.com. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're
Hello?
there. Good night.
Yes, I can scarcely hear you now.
You can scarcely hear me.
Yeah, but anyway, what I want to say, I feel, in your views, you're a bit paradoxical.
Talk to me.
Because, from, other calling programs, I'm hearing that so many are asking for the death penalty to be, instituted, and you happen to be against it. Which,
well, it's my priority. I don't believe. Hold on. We're having a conversation, though. So let's have a conversation. I have a right to not believe or to accept capital punishment, and the reason for that is because of the numerous people who have gone to the gallows innocently. So I have a right not to agree with that. But so do you have a right to be a proponent for the death penalty? I just happen not to agree. That's okay.
Yeah, but what I'm finding is you sort of sympathizing with those people who need, the strictest and the toughest penalty when they've raped and killed and things like that, which I'm supporting that view. And
because I do not agree with the capital punishment, I don't believe with. I don't agree to murdering people in the name of justice. I am being sympathetic to the murderers. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, you sound like that, and
you're entitled.
Let me remind you that Jesus Christ himself, you remember what he said to Peter when Peter cut the fellow's hair who came to arrest him? Well, he said to him, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, mate.
So,
and again,
I am supposed to live by the sword?
In the Bible.
So I am supposed to live by the sword?
Are you Christian?
I'm supposed to live by the sword. My religious background and my beliefs have nothing to do with this. I happen to believe that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, Old Testament, that went out. I don't believe in that.
That is not
I don't
Old
believe in
Testament,
that. That is Old Testament.
That is from Jesus Christ, the New Testament.
That is Old Testament, eye for an eye.
Testament.
I don't believe in that, sir. Do you have another point?
So that's what makes it sounds a bit paradoxical. And let me tell you, the Jamaican Prime Minister just recently sent a strong message to the international agencies, the Amnesty International and Human Rights International, telling them that the death penalty is not meant to deter. It is a punishment. And he is supported by the Trinidadian Prime Minister. So we know what to expect in the Caribbean soon. Something is going to be happening to these bastards who decide to take people's lives indiscriminately.
I agree with
you. And
you.
it doesn't matter what you think about it, you know.
I agree with
see,
you
that's the way to go.
100%.
You cannot be,
Sir,
sounding as
Sir,
if you
Sir,
want,
thank
the
you very
toughest
much.
penalty,
Thank you very
and
much.
yet-
Thank you very much. But the point of it, I'm not going to allow this gentleman to continue to say that I'm sympathetic to any murderer or any rapist, because anybody who watches this show and knows my stand know that I do not sympathize, empathize, or empathize with any murderer and any rapist. These are the very same people who would protect Mr. So-and-so because he is who he is, because he's a government minister, because he's a lawyer, because he's a doctor, because he's a teacher, until it happens to their child. And even when it happens to their child, they're so busy to protect the shame, the child, after. Sir, not all go on so. You will not defame me like this. We have another call online. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Laura.
Good evening, sir.
First time calling to your show.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah. First, I must say I really, really like you. I mean, your personality, your maturity, your thinking. I love it. And I think I would really like to see you. I would like to see you in the next election on a political party. I really think so. Second point is this. I strongly believe that the police have the skilled investigators, and they will solve that case in Labrie. Strongly believe this.
That's what they said about Valinda too, huh?
Well,
that's what they said about Valinda Joseph.
The thing is,
it was a treasure trove of evidence. That's what they said. 15 years later.
In the Valinda incident, the police were told who the person was based on the person's teeth bites. But the police didn't follow up on that, because the guy they have there is the wrong person. He's the wrong person. Because the thing is that it's still the stepfather had sex with her that same night.
That's not sex. That's not sex, sir. That's not sex. Okay. That's a problem. That is rape. Because you are her father, and she's underage, and you're having intercourse with her. That's not sex. She cannot consent. That's our law. We say that.
You're quite correct. She was probably raped by her stepfather in the night, but
in the morning. And it's not her stepfather, it's her father.
Yeah. But in the morning when she went out in the morning, somebody raped and killed her. And the police were told who the person was. And they didn't do their job. But it's very, very sad, eh? Very, very sad.
It is very sad. Yeah, and I'm incensed that anybody would think that I would sympathize with any kind of monster like that. Yeah. Because I can tell you, I would not wish that on any of my family members, on any girl child or any female that I know or don't know, just because we have to let good sense prevail. So many people have died. And then later on we find out, wrong person. So let's just face it. Let's just put this in context for a minute, right? Yeah. What if the person who was arrested and languished in jail for all these years was not the right person? What if, not the right person, but what if that case was called, that person was found guilty, and the death penalty implemented? And then we find out, oops, wrong person. What happens?
I hope that doesn't ever happen, because it shouldn't be a death penalty unless they're 100% sure, 110% sure.
But how can, and that's my point. That's my point. That is my point. It's in 2017, we cannot depend on eyewitnesses, because we know after 48 hours the eyewitness account begins to change. Memories start to fade depending on who the person is, how old, what the light was, this and that and the other. We need scientific proof coupled with the eyewitness account to get these bastards airtight and to deal with them as we need to be. Unless and until that can be done, I will never be supportive of the death penalty. There is just too great a margin for error when you implement the death penalty.
Yeah,
I'm not sympathetic to them. It's just a fact. Can you imagine now, as the hangman, as the person who pulled the noose or however it's done, the guilt that you would feel knowing that you participated in the wrongful murder of an innocent person? Come on.
That's why Laura, I say it must be a 200%. You must be 200%
You've
sure.
got to be certain without a shadow of a doubt. And if you cannot be certain without a shadow of a doubt, I will never support the death penalty.
Yeah.
I cannot.
Lastly, Laura, I must say that the hanging is archaic. I must say the hanging is archaic. I think they should use something else, maybe the lethal injection or something
even
else. But
then,
hanging is archaic.
Well, I agree. If we were looking at shades, degrees of madness era, you know. So yeah, hanging is more inhumane than the lethal injection.
In the 15th century and so on. I mean.
Just like electrocution, was more archaic than hanging or whatever. But thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, bye-bye.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that's it. I mean, we're looking at various shades of madness. I mean, I just don't believe. I was one of those persons, maybe 10 years ago even, or maybe a little bit more, who would be like, off with their heads, off with their heads. But as I progress and I mature, and I do my research and I find out about the number of people. We have another call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air. What's on your mind? Okay, so we lost that call. But as I go on and I do my research and I find out the number of people who have been spared by Amnesty International by the skin of their teeth, or who have actually gone down, murdered by the state. It's tough, man. It's a tough pill to swallow. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Good night, Laura.
Good night, sir. I'm okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to share a quick point with you.
Go ahead.
I've seen your show over the year, and I like some of the points that you bring up. Now, with regards to the rape and the current atmosphere in St. Lucia, one has to not point fingers per se, but there are certain facets that make up our society that just cannot go past the way the box was constructed. So you have the principle of Christianity itself and being used as a solve-it-all for colonialism. And what colonialism did at that time to the black family alone was horrendous. So fast forward to modern day, certain precepts of that, and even in the doctrine itself, has already separated man from woman and has polarized the black family beyond measure. You can see the effects of that in Black America, but staying on the topic of our country, one would have to suggest that certain precepts of our society does put men on a different tangent than women. But is it in any way that our faith or our spirituality will tie those loose ends? Now, if you're looking at it through that lens of Christianity, you're still looking at it from the colonial lens, because we still have a lot of our colonial names, and we still sell it as a product for visitors that come to our shores. So it is going on in the back of our mind, whether we are cognizant of it or not. So what do we do? Where do we turn? And this is what I think I'm seeing is turning on in your mind. You are seeing behind the facade, and you're realizing that there's something missing from us as a people. There's something that was somehow there at one point and was fragmented. And one can dabble to say that probably it is in our traditional roots, and maybe there's some wholesomeness that can come from that. But then with such mixed people, how do you pin down and say, okay, well, this one comes from that part of the continent or that? So how do we come together to form something to bring the people together? Now, Journée Creole was supposed to be based on that, but again, we still are dealing with colonial times. So really and truly, I think it is deconstructing the box and searching to find who we are as our identity. And only then can we find a new model to bring us together and to mend the black family. Because the black family has problems, and if just look, it's problems in America, Section 8 and you name it. And the black family is under enormous pressure and strain. So where do we go as black families? You know, and we're in the third world, so that's still something. What's happening to our families? How do we mend our families? Family first, the nucleus, and then over to our community. So these are kinds of things. It is not just to say, okay, we're going to have an action plan, we're going to have a task force, but it is because our spirituality does not see the environment as part of who we are. It's outside. It doesn't see the woman as a subset of the environment. It's outside. It doesn't see the man as a part of that. So it's so we removed so many great tenets to keep us balanced from the integration. Where do we go? We have to deconstruct the box. And these are brave things which people like you can do. Brave steps. And some people will say, oh my God, and they will bring fear into the equation. But we have tried that.
But you know what? That's the thing. That's the thing. You know, you just hit a nerve because it's the fear thing. You know, I was speaking to a girlfriend of mine just last night, and she was saying, oh my God, why are you doing this at this hour of the night? And I said, let me make you understand something. You have nothing but fear. Nothing to fear but fear itself. If you continue to live your life in fear of all sorts of things, you know you're killing yourself even faster.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why all of these heinous things happen, because everybody is afraid to be the first person to stand against something.
Yeah.
So I am not afraid to say I do not believe in capital. That makes me the bad person, because generally people think that an eye for an eye, you kill somebody, I should kill you. Somebody gets murdered, somebody has to die for that. It doesn't matter who. We're just like bloodthirsty hounds. Doesn't matter who. Anybody will suffice because somebody died and somebody was murdered. And I can't stand for that. And I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of fear. Everybody is so afraid. Afraid to be different in the family. Afraid to step out. Afraid to say, yes, I'm a religious person. I believe in God. But I disagree with this. And have a general discourse and thrash out things. But I'll tell you something. Nothing is ever going to happen if all we are contented to do is to just talk about it. But we have to take another call. We're running out of time. But thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much.
Sure.
You know, somebody says to me on WhatsApp, the only case I know of where a father did jail time in St. Lucia for raping his daughters is in the case of a gentleman from the South, high-ranking public servant. His wife was a nurse at the hospital in the South, and yes, he did years in prison and ultimately died at Sufra Hospital some years ago. I would know about that case only too well because I knew the players in that case. Somebody else says, great work, Laura. Keep up the good philanthropic work and advocacy for women. Never stop voicing those ills which plague our society. We need to find solutions to elevate, eradicate this problem. We need to rally as a nation, lest this place becomes woefully lawless and chaotic. We have a call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Yeah, what's on my mind? You know what happened in St. Lucia? St. Lucia have no law, starting from the police down. No law at all. People are doing what they want. Fellas riding motorcycle in town without no helmet because they're bad boy. The police don't tell them nothing. That's breaking the law. Passing underneath. You know, endless little things. Because the big people, the big men don't get caught.
So we feel we can do it too. Yeah. But you know, it's what I said. I've been saying for the last few weeks. It's the little things. It's the little things that make the big things tolerable. So,
there you are.
So you know what? That one gets away with it, so I'm gonna do it too because I can get away with it. You know, your child comes home with a Pell. You know you didn't give them the Pell, but it's okay because it's just a Pell. Next thing you know, they're coming home with televisions and refrigerators, and we know they ain't working no when they ain't got no paycheck.
Not even that alone. If you talk about it, sometimes you might even get your death.
But that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Because all of us, we're so afraid of everything. We're so afraid of everything. You know, a mother will come and say to another mother that her 5-year-old little boy touched her 4-year-old little girl in her private parts. Oh, Tima, you're just a casual way. Rather than sit the child down and explain to the child good touch and bad touch. And even though it may have been an accident, how you have to behave with other children, how you ought to play decently with other children. Left, right, and center. Nothing for that.
All I could tell you,
and we incubate the monsters.
Doing the good work that you're doing. Make sure, don't stop her. Continue doing the good work that you're doing. I hope maybe you should go up as a minister. Try something in life.
No.
Anyway, have a good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This other person says, Laura, you are so on point tonight. You had a case on your show a year ago about a young girl from Dennery who was kidnapped and bitten badly. She could have been a statistic. We cannot be lenient with these bastards. We need to be serious about our laws. No sympathy for these people who do these crimes, but I understand they are sick, really sick. They spend 2 days in jail and come out and do worse. We need to treat them or hang them. I will go for the treating. We have a call online. We lost the call. We've got another WhatsApp message. Hey, Laura. Good night. I've enjoyed every single moment of your program. Continue to advocate on behalf of our women and kids, especially our little girls. It hurts my heart daily to see the abuse of our females, the abuse our females endure on a daily basis, firsthand by persons that are close to them. My take and what I would love to see worldwide is if one is sentenced to 20 to 30 years, let it be that same amount in a calendar year instead of being cut in half. Thank you. We have another call online. You're on the air. What's on your mind? Okay, the calls continue to drop, but our WhatsApp platform continues to thrive. Somebody says, in the case of Sadia, once they get the killer, they should take him in to the murder site and stone him to death. Again, I do not advocate for the death penalty, and that's just another form of it. But I can understand. You see, there's a difference. I can understand the angst of you. I can, because I go through it. I am one of you. I live in the community. I'm frightened that one day one of my loved ones going to work, going to school, at play or at work could be violated in the worst way. And then on top of that, being murdered. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Good night, Miss Sarah.
Good night, dear.
Miss Laura, I am in my 70s, and I'm at St. Lucian, and I know of hanging. I witnessed. And I never known of anybody that was hung or executed innocently.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know.
How would we know? How do we know? But hold on, I want to ask you this. How do we know that none of them were murdered innocently?
Well, I can tell you that because you see, when
but how do we know? What's the evidence?
How do we know?
Mm-hmm.
It never came out that the people that was hung or executed was innocent.
It never came out because nobody.
I'm talking about St. Lucia.
Yes, it never
I'm not talking about state.
I agree. I hear you. But maybe it never came out because nobody ever cared to find out.
No.
Was anything done? Was any research done? Any investigations done beyond?
The executions that I know of, I tell you, I'm in my 70s, and the executions that I know, none of them was not innocent. I
cannot take your word for it because there's no evidence contrary to that. There's no body of evidence to determine whether it was. You can't tell me, but that doesn't mean I have to accept it. Is what I'm saying.
Well, don't accept it, but I'm telling you. Now, you see, rape, murder. It was established that rape, murder, robbery, murder. That is capital offenses, and there's a penalty to it. Now, you know, we do a lot of talking. Now, I've seen you there. You talk a lot and things. Now, if somebody is charged for murder and they have enough evidence, what do they do with that person?
Bingo, enough evidence. But what is enough evidence? But that's your. But you just giving it to me on a silver platter. Enough evidence. So what is enough evidence? What is enough evidence?
Enough evidence is proof. Enough.
But
evidence
where do we get the proof? Where do we get the proof?
Enough evidence. Eyewitness.
Let me tell you. Let me ask you a question. Do you remember the 2 Seventh-day Adventist pastors who were accused of having inappropriate? That is you see, okay, we can't talk. We cannot talk. No, we cannot talk. We cannot talk. So thank you very much for calling, but we can't talk because it's like I said, it's the little things, the small. Because we want to look at the murder, but we don't want to look at the monsters and how. Do you know that before somebody elevates to killing someone, they start with frogs and ants, little things, and we just bypass that. They start with all of those things. They show the tendencies, but you know what? In our eyes, it's little things. 2 pastors were accused of rape, and all of a sudden, after months and months of having their lives up in the balance, the case was dropped. The charges withdrawn. Who is going to take responsibility for that false accusation? Allegedly, because the charges were dropped. So if it is that the charges were dropped and there was not enough evidence pointing to the guilt of these pastors, it means that somebody made a false allegation. But we do not take the time to find out about it, to investigate that. Somebody has to pay for that. Because if it is those 2 men were innocent, it means that there is somebody out there or some persons out there guilty of a crime. But we don't look at these things. We only say, you know what? We get that desired effect, and that makes it okay. So somebody was murdered, and I'm not saying that they were hung innocently. I'm saying, how do we know? Because back in the day, we had even less techniques than we have now. We have a lab that we're not using. We have all sorts of equipment that we could be using to investigate and to find scientific proof. We ain't using it. So what makes it different? What makes us believe in our minds that anybody who had been hung before in St. Lucia was not innocent? And they may have been guilty of one crime, but were they guilty of the crime for which they were ultimately punished? That is the question. And today, it is okay because that person is not related to us. But what happens when it is your son or your daughter, your father, your nephew, your uncle? What happens when it is your loved one who is facing capital punishment because of a crime that he may or may not have? And that's not to take away from the victim. I am incensed. I am incensed at the Sadias of this world, of the Valindas, the Valerie Lords, the Mary Ratcliffes. These are the ones we ought to always remember. We always ought to remember them and their children, the loved ones that are left behind, to carry that burden with no closure. But I say to you, is it okay just to take a life, to assuage that pain and that grief that we bear because we want it to go away? Is it okay to hurt another family innocently? Does that make it right? Does that justify? Does the end justify the means? I say to you, I am not convinced. That is not to say that we ought not to put the necessary resources where it needs to be to ensure that without a shadow of a doubt that these perpetrators are caught and that they are dealt with as the law permits. And if we're not satisfied with the law, we have it within our rights to lobby our ministers of government, our parliamentarians, to fix it. And if it is that the vast majority of St. Lucians believe in hanging, not just when it does not affect us personally, but carte blanche, regardless of whom it may touch, let us lobby our parliamentarians to effect it because it sits on our law books. We are continually, every year, penalized because we have hanging on our law books, but never effected. We don't hang anybody. When was the last time you heard of somebody being hung? When was the last time that you heard of anybody being hung? You think I don't feel that this person ought to be hung by the gonads and let all the blood rush through the head until every single vein and muscle and vessel busts in the head and they die an enormous, incredibly painful death? I feel that too. But how much of a monster does that make me? When I can visualize the most painful death for anybody without having the foggiest kernel of truth, of evidence to support what I think what I have conceived. What makes me different from them? What makes you different from them? Are we just looking for the slightest excuse to become a monster? Have we too been so incubated that we're monsters in sheep clothing, that we're just waiting to explode, to come out of that cocoon? We cannot be like baseless animals. We cannot be like, you know, today on my way to the studio, I saw 2 dogs. Like, you know how we say they stick on? And I say to myself, what makes us different from these animals? They're coupling in the streets just like that and couldn't be bothered, just standing there, bored as ever, doing it by rote. What makes us different from them? What makes you different from them? Would you be the same if you were faced with your loved one being accused of these heinous crimes? Would you be saying, off with their heads? Let us be reasonable. We're not being sympathetic to any murderer. We're not being sympathetic to any rapist. We're saying, let us put the necessary resources at finding the perpetrators and dealing with them according to the law. That's what we want. That's the closure that we want. Not just to be part and parcel of murder and mayhem, but to be a civil society. To know that criminal-minded people think twice before committing a crime, because they know ultimately that they will be caught, tried, and be brought to justice. But right now, they're feeding off our fear. They're feeding off the frenzy. They're feeding off the fact that we want them dead, knowing full well that they will not be caught. Knowing full well that they will not be caught. We're all out of time. I really wish we had more time, but this is it. Before I leave, I just want you to remember that there are organizations such as the Alexander Family Foundation out there who are trying their best to help, especially the young. And I will always be an advocate for that. Positivity. I will always be an advocate for creating venues and avenues for our young people to express themselves creatively, to expose their talents. So Talent 758 is coming to the north, and they will be at the Grosley Secondary School this Saturday from 9 o'clock. Please register. Any talent will do. There's no age discrimination or talent discrimination. I know you people of the north have been waiting. We've had auditions in the south. We've had auditions in the west and auditions in the east, and this time we're heading up north. Please come out in full support. Show your talent. Show the world. Show St. Lucia that there is positivity residing in our young people in particular. But as I said, it's not age discriminate, so please come out. The time for auditions is from 9 o'clock at the Grosley Secondary School. See you there. Until next week, good night.